Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing, it's the test. Testing one more time. Testing one more time. Marco Taddy, can you hear me? Please write a message if you can hear me. Testing, the test. Testing one more time. Testing one more time. Marco Taddy, can you hear me? Please write a message if you can hear me.
This is a test for Marco. One last time. This is a test for Marco.
Chris, is that you?
Yes. Sorry, I'm getting a drink. Just so you know, we are recording and we are streaming.
Thank you. I did know you were starting that. My question is, can you throw a test message into the chat on YouTube so that I can make sure I can see it?
Yes, you can see. Oh, shoot. Did we do that? I think I did the wrong thing there. Mark already put one up there, but I guess it's
Yeah, I see. Oh, geez. Hold on. There we go. Okay, I see it from Marco. Thank you.
You got it. Hi, Rob. Just so you know that we are streaming live and right now as we prepare, so just be aware of that. And you are muted. For the 42 people or so that are currently watching, you can write into the chat on the right side of the stream, and that will be a moderated, people will be viewing that and hopefully be able to answer those questions throughout the session. I see that. Thank you, Melissa. We do expect a much larger audience, so I think the chat will get kind of, there'll be a lot of chat activity as the meeting goes on, I expect. Oh, I can see it over there. I don't need to do it. Okay. I don't need that. Bring this over here. Hello, thank you for joining. Dr. Parrish, just so you know too, we are live, we're streaming. You're currently on mute, but just to let you know that we are streaming prior to the actual start of the meeting.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anytime. Thanks for joining us, Sarah. Mike, just so you know, we are streaming live prior to the actual start of the meeting. You are on mute. Just want to make you aware of that.
Thank you, Chris.
You got it. Oh, that's my phone. Justine, I just want to let you know you are currently on mute, but we are streaming live right now prior to the start of the meeting. We're up to 120. Again, for those new people to the stream, there's a chat window to the right of the stream, and that's where you can interact and ask questions. That area will be monitored, and they will try and address as many of those questions as possible throughout the discussion. James, just so you know, we are streaming live. You are currently unmuted. Oh, now you're muted, but so prior to the start of the meeting, we are streaming now, just so you're aware. And we're about 4 minutes away from the start. Glad to see people get a jump start, Melissa. That's, that's people want to get their questions in early.
Is Dr. Rasmussen with us?
Mike, I did invite him, but he is currently not on the session yet.
Thank you.
Glad you could join us, Katie. Happy to have you. Jen, just so you know, we are currently streaming live prior to the start of the meeting. Denise, it's only YouTube.
Good evening, everyone. This is Mike Cummings, the Superintendent of Schools. We're going to get started in a couple minutes. I know people are still coming in, so we'll start in 2 minutes. Go in another minute. Excuse me. Chris, are you going to stay on the line, or are we ready to go?
Mike, I'm here because I'll be monitoring it and then, ending the meeting when it's all done. So.
All right, terrific. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chris Brand is helping. All right, we are going to get started. I want to be conscious of everybody's time. I want to make sure that we get some time to get to the questions. So let me get started again. My name is Mike Cummings, Superintendent of School, and I appreciate everybody taking some time tonight to be with us. I'm going to start by going over a few pieces of information with you. Some of you who were listening to the Board of Education meeting last night heard some of this, I want to make sure that I as many people as possible hear and understand where we are coming from and the work we are doing. And then I'm going to go into a relatively short PowerPoint presentation just to make sure that, since this webinar will be taped and kept, that a lot of the highlights are, well, I shouldn't really say they're highlights yet, but a lot of the points that we're trying to make are going to be retained, and that you can refer back to them or have other people refer to them. So first, just a few reminders on the reopening plan before we start talking about the learning models and the implications of the learning models. So first, I want to talk about the 2021 school reopening plan, and I want to address some of the common concerns and questions that have come up in response to that plan. First, and I'm going to come back to this point a couple of times because I don't think we can say this enough. I do apologize for the rapid change of plans that our students, parents, and staff have had to follow over the past 2 weeks. We are continuing to respond to the developing guidance from the state departments of health and education. And as I've told you before, and is documented in some of the FAQ information online, The greatest change we initially have dealt with, but it's certainly had implications on other changes that have followed, was that for a month or so, we developed a reopening plan that we were told to address two possibilities. One was the full 5-day in-person instructional model, and the other was a remote learning option for parents who wanted that choice for their children. And as I've told you, we produced and developed that plan, and I shared it with you on the day it was due, which was July 24th. Then we had the weekend, and then on Monday, July 27th, the governor and the commissioner of education put the hybrid plan on the table. Now, I want to be clear about this. The hybrid plan was always in the back of our minds as the most realistic option to address the concerns that we had. But we did not bring it forward because it wasn't an acceptable option to the state. But we had concerns about our ability to implement the social distancing, the cohorting, and some of the other necessities that are in the plan. So when the governor essentially changed the expectations for our work, that put the hybrid plan on the table on late afternoon of Monday, July 27th. Our plan, as you know, had just gone out, and I want to emphasize again, as I've emphasized from the beginning, the plan that you saw on July 24th was the first draft of a plan that we knew would change even before the announcement about the hybrid plan, because we were waiting for and are still waiting for additional state guidance on certain aspects of the plan. So once that conversation was, in a sense, allowable, we began to look more closely at the hybrid plan, and the reopening plan was being looked at by our building level administrators at each the elementary, middle, and high school folks. And as they looked at this, the needs of our schools to facilitate, as I've said before, the social distancing and the cohorting made the hybrid plan more and more the best choice for us to go forward. So I'm going to say many things tonight, but this is really the most important one that I want to be most clear about this. The decision to recommend the hybrid plan and not the in-person full instruction is based solely on our administration's concerns for the student, staff, and family health and well-being. We know our health data is currently excellent. We are committed to the health data remaining excellent. In our estimation, we cannot fulfill that commitment if we have great concerns with our ability to meet the social distancing and cohort guidelines established by the state. We cannot identify at this point enough spaces, move enough classrooms, or open up enough hallway spaces for this to occur. Given these concerns, and as we've heard from our health officials as well in the town last night, a hybrid approach is the right step forward. Our work is always about balancing the health, well-being, and educational needs of our students in the best possible manner. It's really that simple. This year has been a year of challenges. The fields issues that began the year, and then the pandemic that began in late February and forced our schools to close in March. In that entire time, the health of our students and staff and our families has been the guiding directive of the decisions we make. I understand that a lot of people are unhappy with that, but that is what will always guide our work. And sometimes it's going to work for you, and there's other times it will not. But I promise you that your kids are our first priority as we move forward through this. We do remain committed to finding a way to return to full in-person 5-day-a-week instruction. We have established September 25th as a date to determine if we will need to remain in hybrid or we can make changes that will allow a greater occupancy of our classrooms. So these are three things that we're going to be looking at through the month of September. And this is the work of September, right? Once we get the kids into school, this is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be reviewing the progress of social distancing expectations to assess whether we can find additional spaces in the schools. We're going to be monitoring cohorts to assess if we can further reduce student interactions. And we're going to monitor air quality issues and hope that with the passing of warmer weather in September, cooler weather will help us address some of the air quality issues that we face every school year. If we can do this, and most importantly, if the health data remains strong, we will bring students back full-time in early October. This is, again, the focus of our work in the first 4 weeks of school. And again, everything is dependent on not only the work we can do, but on the strong health data of the town, county, and state levels. So I'm going to now turn to introduce you to some slides, talk a little bit about who's with us tonight, and then we're going to begin to answer your questions. So if you excuse me 1 second, I'm just going to move into present. It didn't work. Hold on 1 second. Oh, I'm sorry. I hit the wrong button. Sorry about that. Is that PowerPoint showing?
No.
Okay.
It's not.
All right. Hold on 1 second. Oh. How about now?
Yes, it's loading.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. I forgot with this one, you have an extra click. All right, there it is.
Yes, Mike. Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let me talk about the learning model options tonight. But before we get into the questions, I want to answer some of the present some of the background on the work that's going into this. So first of all, joining me tonight is the following folks: Dr. Zakia Parrish, Dr. James Savachancic, Mr. Rob Mancusi, Ms. Colleen DC. Ms. DC, by the way, will also serve as our moderator tonight for the questions. And from our curriculum and instruction support, crack support team, Dr. Swindler, Dr. Puglisi, Ms. LaSala. So let's take an honest look at where we are as a community right now. And I think these 4 words, and perhaps you can think of some others, but these 4 words really describe how a lot of us are feeling as we go through the emotions of not only now in the schools reopening, but certainly over the past months since March. And the constant talk about second waves and following the data in the newspapers and on the TV only leads to kind of deepen these feelings and concerns. It's very difficult at a time like this to have faith in institutions and organizations. I certainly understand that. It taxes me at times as well. But I want to, again, restate what I said just a couple of minutes ago. Our relationship with you is based on trust. And as I said, you can trust us that we're going to do right by your students at every turn. So again, you may not agree with how that looks or works, and I certainly understand this because this is a very everybody's lives are complex, and there's a lot of implications for the decisions we make. We respect that, we honor that, we understand that, but that is what's going to drive our decision. So I'm going to make the following statements, and I'm going to refer back to that word that I so artfully put in green before, and that's the word trust. So I know there's a lot of concerns, and I get this, around how the remote learning worked in the spring. We did a very good job for having to react very quickly, but it was not sustainable collectively across the district. And one of the things that I hear continually, and I understand, and our teachers understand, and our administrators understand, is that people had very uneven experiences with distance learning in the spring. So our work has been, since the end of the school year, and since we conducted that family survey at the end of May, about building consistency across the school district for instruction, not just remote instruction, but instruction. So trust us when I say to you that we are very concerned about the impact of the hybrid plan on the families of Fairfield. We are working to find additional childcare opportunities for students, both on-site and off-site, wrapped around the different hybrid models and different timeframes of the day. We are very concerned with supporting students who are home as part of hybrid learning. And we are looking at means of providing them support so they can remain on track and have their questions answered while they're home. We understand that that is a concern for you. We respect it as a concern, and we're working to fix it. Now, I want to make and I apologize for even using this because I hate cliches, but this is a metaphor that's used all the time, and I'm going to use it anyway. And that is the idea of building the plane while we're flying it. And this is certainly happening here. But, you know, to extend the metaphor, we are building this plane while we're flying it with really our most precious cargo aboard, with thousands of anxious parents watching us through every move. It shouldn't be like this. When we make changes in the Fairfield Public Schools, we have an expectation that those changes will be well thought out in advance and that implementation will be smooth. We've not been able to do that because of the rapidity with the changes and the short time frame. So as we put something out, we're changing it in front of you. And I understand that probably more than anything, that creates a serious issue with trust. But our effort is to make the plan better all the time in response to the concerns that you raise. We can't deviate from the goals of bringing students back to schools that uphold the necessary conditions for continued good health and well-being. So while I understand and appreciate the people who write and say to me that we really have to have the 5-day full in-person option, we can't do that if we're going to uphold the goal of continued good health and well-being. So that doesn't become an option. Our options remain the hybrid model or the optional remote learning model that parents may select. And in that approach, using those two, we're going to make those the best they can possibly be. But those are the models that we're working with. This has really kind of come up as a subtext, and it's very bothersome, and I want to just hit it right now. You know, this idea that somehow people don't want to work with kids. You know, I've been doing this. This is my 35th year. If people didn't want to work with kids, they would have quit a long time ago. I want people just to understand that this is a really tough job, and it takes a lot out of people, and people put a lot into it. And so while I'm no apologist for the teachers, you know, and I'm not here to explain them, they have plenty of people who can do that better than I. But for the teachers and administrators, the paraprofessionals, the secretaries, the custodians, everybody who works with kids, this is a community and a family, and we're devoid of our existence if children are not in our schools with us. So I cannot emphasize that piece enough. And please hear us on this. So I want to talk specifics here and stop being so emotional. So let's talk about the changes you will see in instruction this year. And every slide is going to look the same. So I'll just say it. Changes you will see in instruction this year, whether in hybrid, remote, for all are in person. And any of the 3 models we developed for the state, this is what you're going to see. And this is, again, based all on the feedback that we heard from you back in May. And I also want to emphasize here, when that feedback was shared with the teachers, well, actually, even before that, I was hearing a lot of the same concerns from the teachers and the administrators that I was hearing from parents. So there was a genuine common understanding of how things could get better, even before we set out to work on that this summer. So these are things that you are going to see from us this year. And I'll say at the outset, if you're not seeing this, you need to let us know, because these are non-negotiables that we're putting forth for you today.
Mike, I have to interrupt you for a second. For some reason, the slides are not showing on YouTube, so I don't think the people who are watching at home can see what you're referencing.
Okay, so I'll read these then, and then we'll make sure that they're available. Yeah. I'll put them out. Thank you, Colleen. So I will read this. I apologize for everybody who can't see them. So changes you will see in instruction this year. First of all, you'll see timely communications and feedback. You'll see a consistent use of Google Classroom as the primary learning platform. Although students may engage in other applications, all those directions will be supplied to you, and we will be putting together webinars and videos to support both parent and teacher use of those applications. And you're going to see more student-teacher interaction. So specifically, in the hybrid model, we have increased expectations for student-teacher interactions to a minimum of 3 times per week in 6-12 and 5 times per week in elementary. And as I said earlier, we're going to be working on the days when students are not in school in the hybrid model at secondary on ways that we can further increase interactions with staff. And in the remote plan, depending on the grade level and course, we would expect student-teacher interactions on a daily basis. We'll talk a little bit about this more when we talk about the remote learning plan, because it is more complex, particularly as students get older, students in the last couple of years of high school. I'll go on the next slide. So again, other changes you will see. You'll see common, consistent expectations for student work. Staff has spent time this summer and will continue to spend time during the school year identifying curriculum expectation priorities in order to remain consistent across classrooms. So we spent, again, a lot of time this summer looking at our curriculum, identifying what the priorities were, and we will be working with our teachers beginning in August and through the year to make sure that they're rightfully trained in and have an understanding, a common understanding of what those expectations are. But our teachers put that together this summer. Next slide. You're going to see common expectations in lesson design. So what this means, teachers have shared successful practices from the spring with each other. These practices promote student interactions and engagement using technology, but also live and in-person instruction. And what this does not mean, students will not be working independently, untethered from expectations and oversight. So I don't want people to think, and I understand if this perception is out there, but students will be anchored to the work and we'll be checking in on them as appropriate to make sure that they know what they need to do and they get support in helping to achieve their learning goals. I'm on the next slide, additional changes you'll see. Assessments, student progress is going to be measured against content and skill expectations. We're changing our assessment design if we are going to be doing some of this online. But a lot of, this came up as a comment. I want to make sure I address this. It is not an expectation that when students are actually in front of the teacher that they're going to be taking tests all the time. I just want to be really clear on this. The teachers have spent a lot of time thinking about how assessments can also be delivered using technology. So I just want people to understand that. And finally, the last thing is oversight. Our administrators are going to support teachers in meeting curricular and instructional goals through continuous professional learning and peer support. And I am on the last slide. So a few last points. And I apologize for reading this to you, but if you can't see it, what choice do we have, right? So it is clear that many parents are looking to see the instruction. Well, let me start this over again. I'm not going to read from the slide right at the first line here. One of the things that we're thinking as we listen to the parent concerns that are coming in is that there's a perception that we have that that as parents we're looking for. We take comfort in the instruction we had as students ourselves. Perhaps we actually don't take comfort in it, depending on our school experiences. but it's what's familiar to us, and it's what we expect to see for our kids. But that instruction has been on its way out for over a decade. If you look back to the standards that have changed in all of our curricular areas over the past 10 years, and the shift in education standards have been from content knowledge to the development of skills, particularly around skills such as inquiry, in combination with content knowledge, that has not only changed learning expectations, it's changed instruction and it's changed learning. So there's a deeper expectation for how students are going to apply the things they learn to the problems they encounter. And the expectation is that they'll take their learning from the classroom outside the classroom to problems and things that they'll encounter outside of the classroom and as they move through life, or take from one course to the other. Our students are far more comfortable with this than we are, because this is what they've experienced now, really for the past 8 to 10 years. And this is one of the key reasons, and this concept keeps coming up, and I want to just address it now. This is one of the key reasons why the live streaming content from the classroom to the family room will not work. I know that some other districts are doing this, and I know that it presents as these are my words, as a relatively easy thing to implement and just get it done. But it does not support good instruction to have a teacher trying to teach to both a group of students at home and a group of students in the classroom. And it's not necessarily, it certainly raises a lot of concerns for the students at home, how they will actively be engaged in their instruction. It leads to a sit and get type of atmosphere for instruction and learning, which is not conducive to actual active engagement. We can do better than that. I will say this, we're going to monitor those districts and what they're doing. If we see progress in what they're doing, if we see benefit in what we're doing, then we'll jump on that bandwagon. But quite honestly, it presents a lot of technological issues. It prevents big financial issues, and it's putting all of your instructional, here's another overused metaphor, eggs in one basket. And if that doesn't work, what are you left with? You have to change instruction. You just can't put a camera in a room and think things are going to be fine. So I just want to emphasize that point. And again, we will follow it. We'll look at it. And if I'm proven wrong, I'll be proven wrong. But I'd rather other people find out how this works or doesn't work. And we'll learn from benefit from their errors. So with that said, I'm going to turn to questions. I'll stop presenting. And we will get the PowerPoint online for you tomorrow, I promise. Okay, just give me a second.
Okay.
I'm
Hi,
off.
everyone. I'm Colleen Deasy. I'm the Executive Director of Personnel and Legal Services. We have quite a few questions, and Mike, I stand corrected. About 200 people, I think, just told me in the chat that they could see your slides. There was just a minority of us who could not. So I just want to say for the record that I was one of very few people who could not access that. So with that said, I think that there are some big picture logistical questions that we can tackle first. One of the big ones, and Mike, I think you could probably answer this in tandem with James and Zakia, was what are the schedules going to look like for hybrid learning? Can we talk more about that? Is there going to be specific times that students are expected to log on? If they do distance, are those times different from expectations if they're doing hybrid? How does all of that break down?
Yes, there are specific schedules. Part of what we're looking at in this will be going back to something I said a little bit earlier, and I'll have doctors have a chance to get Dr. Parrish expand on this, but if they wish. But I said earlier that one of the things we're looking at is how we're going to provide supports for students who are in hybrid learning and not in school. And how we do that will determine some of that scheduling. So I don't know if Dr. Parrish or Dr. Zavachanczyk want to follow up on that.
Yes, this is Zakia Parrish, Executive Director of Operations and Processes. So the way in which it will be put together will look different by level. So even though the secondary schools 6 through 12 are following a similar or the same hybrid model, the support that will be provided to students when they're not in school on that particular day will look different, just because of the schedules that are different between high school and middle school, as well as the available staff. So we're working with the administrative teams to come up with some different ideas of how that support might look at the various levels. On Wednesdays, even though everyone is remote, that is a time in which both cohorts would be united. And so the teachers would be able to have interactions with both cohorts that'll allow them to have, you know, a joint class, you know, small group conversations, breaking students up into groups, one-on-one conversations, you know, conferencing type of situation. So that happens on Wednesdays across the board from 6 through 12. And so as we continue to make adjustments based on the information that we get from parents, but also the feasibility and working it into the schedule and making sure that it is something that's feasible within the course of the school day for our students and our staff, we'll continue to update those plans and provide those plans via our website.
James Evajancic, Executive Director of Instruction, Curriculum, and Assessment. I want to echo Dr. Parrish's characteristics of both the hybrid and the remote plan. The only thing I want to clarify for the elementary school is that the cohorts are by AM and PM, so students will meet every single day, Monday through Friday in a given week. They'll be assigned to an AM and PM cohort, and there will be both a mix of synchronous and asynchronous learning in the remote option each and every day. So that's one of the main differences between the elementary and the 6-12 model that Dr. Parrish just spoke about. Otherwise, the options in terms of the types and modes of learning would be the same K-12. Thank you.
So the next major theme of questions I would say is about cohorting, the logistics of cohorting. And I think that what I'm seeing from parents is that they are very much concerned with how cohorts are going to be selected, when that information is going to be available to them, and then from there, I think there are more specific questions about, can students switch a cohort if they need to? Can a student request, or can a family request that they're in a cohort with another family? Can a family request a certain time, either morning or afternoon for elementary school, that works for them? So I think that while the focus of, I know the team that we have here is to talk about the instruction of the two models, I think that for the people who are tuning in, they really have some immediate day-to-day logistical concerns that they're trying to also figure out. So I wonder if we can talk through that. I don't know, Mike, if you want to start.
No, I was going to actually ask Dr. Parrish. I know that she's been very involved with this.
So in terms of the cohort model, so what we're doing is using Infinite Campus to develop random cohorts based on households. So we're not using a particular selection process at this point in time. There is not a process for students to, or for parents to select a particular cohort for their child. One of the reasons why is we have to maintain that 50% balance. That basically makes the hybrid model, and also balance in terms of our transportation. So at this time, there is not a mechanism for parents to be able to select a cohort. It's something that we're looking at, possible criteria in emergency types of situations, establishing a set of criteria based on the level of the student in order to make those adjustments as necessary, but understanding that the initial process, there isn't a specific criteria that we're using to determine which cohort a student is in, other than making sure that if they have a sibling in another school and they're in first grade and that sibling is in fifth grade, that those two siblings are on the same cohort schedule. I think the other question was in reference to, can you refresh my memory, Ms. DC? A final question.
the requests that parents would make about moving between cohorts, about timing, about going in and out of distance learning to hybrid. How is all of that going to be handled?
Okay, so timing, in terms of timing, so the survey closes next Sunday. Our information technology team needs at least a week and a half, so they're targeting August 26th to have all the cohorting completed and that information given back to schools so that they can finalize schedules and get that information out to parents and families. So that is the timeline that we're working on, hoping that, there are no other natural disasters or anything else that prevents us from being able to move this work forward. But it is a process that they do have to work through for all of the families and students within Fairfield Public Schools. In terms of moving in between hybrid and remote, opting into remote. So we do ask that parents, if you do make the decision to initially opt into the 100% remote program, that you give us at least 10 instructional days to make the switch back to hybrid at the in-person part of it, because we have to make sure that the cohorts are balanced. We also have to make sure that we have adequate transportation, that the bus situation is also balanced. So we say up to 10 instructional days. Our hope is that it will be a process that we can move along a lot faster. But that is the request if you're moving from remote to the in-person hybrid. In the reverse order, we say 10 instructional days, but that's typically, that should be something that could be done within a day or two, because it's just a matter of changing the way in which your child is identified within Infinite Campus. So basically changing their identity from being in the hybrid model to being in the 100% remote option. So that shouldn't take as long, and it should be a relatively quick process, but there is a little more planning that needs to be done if you're going the reverse direction. And I think I answered all parts.
I think you did.
Okay.
I'm not surprised. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything. I can certainly pause for a moment, but we can move on because there's quite a bit to get through here. Okay. On the topic, I think, of cohorting, especially at the elementary school level, there was a question about if a student is in cohort A and they're in school in the morning and they go home for the afternoon, do they have the same teacher overseeing their Google Classroom in the afternoon? And how is that going to work? How is teacher assignment going to work with the hybrid model?
Would you like me to take that one?
Yes, please.
Sure. So the elementary hybrid model for the cohort, the PM home time or the AM home time in reverse of that, of the in-class instruction, will be staffed by the regular teacher. We heard a lot of the comments in the parent survey about the multiple different classrooms virtually. Teachers are going to be using Google Classroom as their main platform for all communication and classwork, but there's a variety of different classes, disciplines, and activities that are going to happen in the remote learning piece. So for example, students' special teachers, which are classes like physical education, art, music, will all be delivered in the remote model and will all be delivered synchronously and asynchronously. So they might have their art teacher or their music teacher delivering the instruction through the Google Classroom. There's also both an intervention and an acceleration block in there. So they may not have their classroom teacher working on that, but they might have another member of the faculty who they're familiar with as well. Science, social studies, health will be delivered through the Google Classroom by the same teacher that they had in the morning or the afternoon while they were in school. And same thing for both the word work, phonics, and numeracy block, in addition to the one during in-person, will be delivered by the actual classroom teacher. So we will not be switching the primary teacher from remote to in-person.
Thank you. I think the next big picture question that I've seen come up a couple of different ways is how it was determined that this would be the recommendation for a hybrid model, this specific model. Why is it half days? what was for elementary school? What was the thought that went into that, and then what was the thinking that went into the model at the secondary level as well?
I'll start that, and if either Dr. Parrish or Dr. Zavichensik want to jump on the answer, but I would say that the commonality between the two models in the thinking of the administrative teams who put them together, the commonality is an effort to balance both the need to engage students as consistently as possible with balancing that with the instructional time needed to also move forward in the curriculum. So let me start with the elementary. The elementary team worked on the idea that if you think about the elementary day, the most important part of the elementary day is the components of literacy, reading and writing, phonics instruction, and then math. And that would be the 2-3 content areas that would benefit the most from direct student-teacher interaction. Particularly in the early grades, students can make a lot of progress in a very short time. And so having that daily interaction with students was seen as necessary in order to make sure that students were being, as they were moving forward, being sufficiently challenged to keep them moving forward. And if they were struggling, would allow opportunity and time to provide intervention. And the schedule that they built reflects that priority. With all due respect to the other instructional areas, those were felt that they could be done through the hybrid model in the afternoon or the morning, and delivered virtually, and did not require as much direct instruction as reading, writing, and math. And one last point I think I said, but I want to make sure I emphasize the ability to see students every day is to ensure that they are academically moving forward, but also to keep them engaged and to reduce frustrations students may feel when they're not feeling engaged. And a student may sense frustration from not only struggling with the work, but also feeling like they're not being challenged enough by the work. At the secondary level, similar issues, but a different time frame. So the high school was very clear when we began working on this that the teachers and the students have done very well in the extended block of time. And it was felt that it was really important to continue to do that because the teachers have shifted their instruction to work within that block. Students work well within that block. So the idea was to continue that in the hybrid model. And let me talk about middle school for a second, then I'll talk about the kind of sequencing of the days. At middle school, because they have a current 7-period day schedule, and again, to remain caught up with the curriculum, it was felt that they needed to meet every period of every of those days when students were in school in order to maintain progress during the course of the year on the curriculum and the instruction, the content and the skills that were needed in the instruction. So the schedules reflect really what students are both currently experienced, students and staff are currently experienced or used to, because that works well for them. Now the timing issue was last year. One of the things that not only was an issue in Fairfield, but was an issue across distance learning everywhere it was occurring was the level of student engagement, and by that I don't mean that kids just showed up. I mean that's a piece to it, but there's another level of student engagement we talk about where kids are actively involved in their learning. So the administrators felt that seeing the students on the current schedule, either Monday, Thursday, or Tuesday, Friday, with everybody having the opportunity to meet together virtually on Wednesday, would keep students on track moving through the period of hybrid learning. Their concern was that if students came in Monday and Tuesday, if we had virtual on Wednesday, 4 days out, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, a day off on a Monday, would really interrupt student progress and flow in their learning. So That's the schedule that they came up with. And when they became aware of it, the middle school adopted it for the exact same reasons. So I don't know if Dr. Zavachancik or Dr. Parrish want to add to that at all.
So if I could just add to the elementary, the continuity, as Mr. Cummings has spoke about, was really important for the elementary team, but also the continuity between different disciplines. For example, the language arts block being used to support the remote science and social studies block, where they can integrate literacy activities across different domains and connect them from day-to-day instruction. The other thing I'll add is that by doing the AM, PM, and leaving the disciplines the way they are, it keeps the cohort a little more stable in the elementary schools between which teachers are coming in and out, which patterns are being used throughout the building, and how students are mixing between classrooms. And then lastly, I'll say that we were able to build in a number of social emotional learning activities within the in-person day to support connectedness to school, to community, and to their classroom.
On the high school level, I think another thing that was really important was the continuity. And we all of us, our goal and our hope is that we can resume 5 days a week in person instruction. And so they wanted to be sure that, if and when that happens, that there was this continuity that was able to happen as students transition, not just on high school level, but also on the middle school level, that there was this continuity, that students were able to make that transition with little to no negative impact on their instruction and also their social emotional well-being.
Thank you. I think the next major question is really the lingering effects of how things unfolded or didn't unfold in the spring. And people really want to hear about what is going to be different about this year if I do pick distance learning, or even when my student is home, engaged in remote learning through the hybrid model. How is that going to be different than what their experience was during this past spring? And what exactly, when we say contact with the student from someone at school, what do we mean by that? What does that mean for the student sitting in front of their computer at their kitchen table?
Shall I begin?
Sure.
Sure.
Great. So, I may have mentioned somebody at school. There's a number of teachers who an elementary student who will come in contact with throughout the day besides their classroom teacher. So when I say someone throughout the building, beyond the specialists, there are reading specialists and math and science teachers that they will come in contact with naturally in person throughout the day. And that will continue in the remote schedule as well. Just to touch upon the difference or the delivering effects from spring in terms of remote or hybrid, we have placed schedules, or I should say sample schedules, online for both of these. There are some standards in place for how often a student would have to sign into a live session with a student or with students, a classroom, a small group, or one-on-one throughout the day. So those are available. I could go into more depth in them if it comes up as a question. Same thing for the hybrid plan as well. There are times blocked off that are both live instruction as well as more independent work for the students there. The curriculum leaders throughout the district, alongside with teachers throughout the district who are implementing those units throughout the year, did a tremendous amount of work this summer on looking at the learning tasks and how they'll be implemented consistently in buildings and across districts. So we're hoping we've taken care of a number of those issues that might have come up in the spring with consistency across grade levels, schools, and disciplines starting off the year in a hybrid model.
I'm going to jump in, and I'm going to wonder if one of our program directors wants to comment on what they see and the work they've done with their teachers and their departments to transition from the distance learning that took place in the spring to the distance learning and hybrid learning, remote learning that will take place this year. And any
Sure.
one of you can continue.
Sure.
There you go. I knew you would be you.
Sure. This is Greg Pugliese. I'm the Director of Social Studies and Student-Centered Learning, K-12. I guess I'll start by saying, you know, the teachers will be the first ones to tell you that there was a lot to improve upon from the spring. But there was also a lot of really, really good planning and learning that happened during the spring as well. So there's a good base to start from. And the other positive thing that we're looking at now during the summer in our planning is that we know what we're planning for too. So when Mr. Cummings earlier talked about the process of identifying curriculum expectation priorities, what we're really doing is prioritizing conceptual understandings. So I'll give you an example for social studies. The work that the teachers were doing over the summer for social studies is really planning out units with large essential questions, conceptual essential questions as a starting point, with a summative performance task in mind. And then in between the introduction of the essential question and when the students are completing their product for the performance tasks, there are a few supporting questions along the way which provide the students a structure and a framework to build conceptual content understandings and building of skills along the way as well. So the planning really is about conceptual learning from start to finish, and thinking about big picture outcomes too. So it's a little bit different than what we might think of as traditional planning and traditional instruction.
This is Rob Mancusi. I'm the Executive Director of Special Education and Special Programs. Just from a special education perspective, what is going to be different in remote learning this fall versus distance learning from March to June? What we learned in conversations with teachers and a ton of conversations with parents of students with disabilities is what the greatest impact that we had on students during distance learning was when we were able to interact through live video. Provide instruction through the use of live video, and then just to interact with students and conference with students through the use of live video versus through an email or a phone call. So what we will be committing to is a 50-50 synchronous, asynchronous model, whether the student participates in the hybrid program or remote learning. We're going to provide 50%, a minimum of 50% of special education and related services are going to be provided through live video, or if the student is attending school, we're going to attempt to provide special education and related service to the greatest extent possible in person, and then remotely use a 50-50 model. So a minimum of 50% of all services remotely will be provided utilizing live and video instruction and interaction across the board. There was great inconsistency across the district in that how we utilized live video or didn't utilize live video.
Rob, there are, I'm sure you will not be surprised to hear, a lot of questions that I think would be fielded by you in the chat. And I think maybe this would be a good plug for you for Monday's webinar. But just quickly, can you talk about your vision for your department in terms of how, with the hybrid plan, pull out versus push-in services might occur, especially something like OT, PT, speech and language, what you're thinking, just sort of broadly for that.
Okay, well, to the greatest extent possible, we are promoting cohorting. I think that's in line with the state guidance, as well as providing classroom-based special education and related services, understanding that might not always be what is in the student's best interest. So we are leaving the ultimate determination of service site up to the school-based team in collaboration with families on what makes most sense for for the students, but keeping the concepts of cohorting and social distancing and minimizing movement from one area of the building to the other area of the building to the greatest extent possible. We also, as a special ed department, understand that so many of our students with disabilities had such a difficult time accessing learning through distance learning this past fall, winter, and spring. We do also understand in conversations with many of you that when live video instruction was introduced and that live interaction, face-to-face interaction, student engagement and performance increased significantly. So by implementing the 50-50 model, we're hoping that, you know, students will benefit from their specialized instruction and related services with moving forward into the fall much more than they did, you know, last school year. We are having our own parent webinar on special education on Monday night at 7 o'clock. So we will be sending out a link on that. We will do a brief presentation similar to what Mr. Cummings did tonight, just regarding on where we are or where we're going for our, you know, each of our levels in terms of what our plans will look like. And we will also be prepared to discuss, there's a state meeting tomorrow that we're attending tomorrow afternoon, because we just received this afternoon an additional 11 pages of updated guidance regarding special ed programming. So we will be able to share the newest information with you on Monday. If you have any questions prior to Monday that you would like me to be prepared to speak to, you can email me. But we do look forward to having our own webinar on Monday, because I know that there are so many questions about special ed here.
I just want to jump in real quick. Mr. Mancusi mentioned the guidance we just received late this afternoon. We will be posting that online on the website tomorrow. We have a section there with state documents, and it will be included that. And it's going to be called Special Education Addendum 6. So it's Addendum 6, Special Education.
Then, Rob, can you speak to specifically what the plan is for the ECC? There are some questions in the chat about what we're thinking for preschool. I know that you can expand on that on Monday as well, but if you could touch on it quickly, I think that would help.
Similar to the elementary school, preschoolers would be coming to school in cohorts, an AM cohort and a PM cohort, 4 days per week, Wednesday being a remote learning day, or Wednesday being a day, I'm sorry, not a remote learning day, where we will be doing our child find activities, we'll be doing evaluations, we will be having our remote PPTs, and then students, obviously, per their IEPs at the preschool who go double session, we will be honoring their IEPs. That is something, again, we can talk in more detail on Monday. We are looking at and developing some plans. For our highest risk students, the state refers to them students with high needs. Those are our students who often need one-to-one or one-to-two behavioral support throughout their day. Students who have difficulty, you know, with personal hygiene or feeding or communication skills. So we're looking to provide them much more opportunities for in-person learning. And then we're also looking at our other vulnerable population of students who may be significantly below grade level academically in reading or other areas. So we'll be prepared to address those concerns on Monday.
Thank you. So a couple of notes, just, I guess housekeeping notes at this point. There are a lot of questions in the chat about cleaning, safety protocols, PPE, plexiglass. None of that is going to be discussed tonight because that was not the plan for this webinar. This webinar is really focusing on the academic plan for the coming year. So
This is Rob Mancusi again. If I could just speak to the special ed piece of the PPE and the mask wearing.
Yes, you can.
I'm sorry. We are waiting for more guidance on mask wearing, particularly as it relates to medical exemptions and as it relates to students who really struggle with mask wearing. There is an expectation that most students are able to wear masks. We will be sending out, as we get closer to school, some, stories or some videos on mask wearing related to COVID-19 and why it's so important that we wear a mask. And there are additional, like PPE will be available for students who are exempt from wearing masks, such as shields or physical barriers such as plexiglass, and for staff and students.
Thank you, Rob. So back to my housekeeping notes. I would say that there's a huge swell of requests in the chat right now for separate webinars on elementary versus middle school versus high school. People are feeling like they're not getting enough specific information about the age group that their child is in. I don't know if we have enough time to schedule that before people have to make their decision on this. I think that's the reality of the timeline that we're looking at, but I will try to hit some of the specific questions quickly, see if we can get through as many as possible in the next couple of minutes. So the first one, this one might be to some of the curriculum leaders. There are questions about rigor, I think, of work, both in the hybrid and the distance learning model. What is that going to look like for students, especially students who are taking AP classes? Is there going to be some kind of different curriculum for the students who are only doing distance learning? What is the planning that has been done around that?
I think I want to go in there.
Yes, Mike will go first. Thank you.
Let me jump in there a little bit, because I think I alluded to this a little bit earlier, and I think this is one of the complicating issues of the high school remote learning option. So if you're selecting the remote learning option at the high school, it's going to be more of the only analogy I will use here is an a la carte menu, depending on the courses that a student is enrolled in. So a freshman student in the remote learning option, we can probably provide most of those courses in-house with other students in that grade level who have elected remote learning, because we offer multiple sections. If you think about it, right, of freshman courses, we offer multiple sections of English, social studies, science, math, world language. Some of the more problematic issues might be the elective areas, but for the core courses, as it were, we are likely to be able to offer at least one section of, say, freshman English that would be done virtually online. And we would staff that to support the students. A student in junior or senior year who is taking what we talk about in high school is, when we schedule, we talk about these courses as singletons. A singleton is a course where probably you might have one or two sections running, but it's not got a lot of student enrollment, and it's taught by a teacher who's probably most likely highly trained in the content area, and specifically in that area that would be being addressed. We might have one or two students in those courses who decide on remote learning. We have a couple of options in front of us, depending again on the number. One of the things that we're talking about is how might we join with our neighboring districts, who again each might have one or two of these students interested in that course, and how might we support those students through a regional course, as it were. We also have online learning options that are available on a subscription basis. And so that's another option that we would deal with. So it becomes a little more complex the older a student is, but on the other hand, it also presents a number of other possibilities. I don't know if any of the program directors want to speak to that further.
Justine did have her hand up earlier.
Great.
Sure. This is Justine Lasala, Program Director for Secondary Science and STEAM. One thing I can say going into this year, as opposed to last year, we've had time to plan, which we didn't have before. And we've also learned a lot about what works and doesn't work. So knowing that, we spent a lot of time in the science department this summer planning for developing units, common units that would work whether in the hybrid model, the remote model, or the in-school model. We want our units to be fluid so that students, if we transition into an in-person model, those unit plans will still work. So we're just leveraging some additional tools such as online simulations and other online tools that can further enhance science learning.
Thank you. I don't know if Dr. Swingler or Dr. Pugliese want to add anything. If not, I can continue on in my attempt to do a lightning round here.
I only have one other thing, Colleen. I heard that, that request for the level webinars, I agree. We're not going to be able to get those done before the selection process, but I want people to know that we are looking to try to plan more specific level webinars as we get closer to the start of the school year.
So, Justine, while you're unmuted, I do have a specific question for you, and that is, it came up, what are labs going to look like for science teachers at the secondary level? And I think that is going to affect, not just at the secondary level, it's going to affect how we're thinking STEAM will work at the elementary level, and it's also going to speak to materials in general across grade levels and across subject areas. So if you could speak to science and give one example of what you're thinking, that would be, I think, helpful, at least as a starting point for people.
Sure. So primarily, first and foremost, we are definitely planning on leveraging the use of online simulations and modeling programs to support science learning. And actually, research supports that these methods of supporting science learning can be more effective than in-person labs. However, we completely feel that labs are a really important part of science learning. So though they might not look exactly like they've done in the past, we've done some creative thinking around how we might be able to provide students some materials to bring home to engage investigations with, or how we might be able to use disposable materials on those days when students are in classrooms, and they will still be able to engage in lab activities. So we're definitely going to have to be creative and think a little bit differently than we have in the past, but I think it's doable, and I think we can still support effective science instruction for our students.
Thank you. A similar question that has come up several times that's specific is, what about music? What about band? What about orchestra? What about our choral groups? How is that going to work? And I don't know if Mike or James, you want to try to take a stab at that.
Let me start, and I think Dr. Savachancik has more information than I do, but this came up last night in the Board of Education meeting, and it is one of the areas that we were told, I believe it was actually yesterday late afternoon by the state, that we should expect more guidance from the state around how we're going to conduct music classes, and that I believe that is expected by Friday. So we'll be able to update on that. But music, as the question implies, has a lot of challenges, and I know Dr. Savachancik's been meeting with our music teacher on that, if he would like to comment.
Yeah, I don't have much more to add about music. In the elementary, it's obviously all remote at this point for music. There are a number of restrictions or guidelines from the state on many music classes, particularly the chorus or the wind instruments, where students' spacing is 12 feet or more between, and that just places a number of room restrictions on how we can deliver the program. There's also questions about individual lessons and coaching, so to say, that we're waiting for more guidance on for the 6-12 level.
Thank you. Another question that came up is, are there going to be opportunities for students to socialize with each other in either model? Is that going to be part of the consideration?
So this is Zakia Parrish, Director of Operations and Processes. Definitely, the social emotional learning is going to be built in throughout the different levels, and part of that includes socialization. Part of what teachers are going to do on those days when you have the two cohorts united on that Wednesday remote day is provide them an opportunity to engage in activities that will bond them as an actual classroom unit as a classroom community. And so while there won't be traditional opportunities per se that we're used to under our old circumstances, there are opportunities for students to socialize and also to engage, allow teachers and staff to monitor how they're doing, both not just academically, but also physically and emotionally and socially. And that's also the case with staff as well, to make sure that they are able to be of service to our kids. And so their well-being is just as important. And so there are some days that are built in at the start of the year and also throughout the year in order to provide staff with tools to not only support themselves, but support their students through a different environment.
If I could just, this is Rob Mancusi again, Executive Director of Special Education. If I could just hop on what Zakiya said. Social emotional learning is going to be one of our primary focuses this year, not only as a special education department, but as a school district, supporting the social emotional learning needs of students, families, and staff. And how that is going to be done or can be done is at the high school, middle schools, they will have advisories, as Dr. Zavajancic said. I tried to pronounce your name the best I could, James. We are, there's a daily SEL time built into the schedule. We realize how difficult this has been on so many people, this prolonged closure. We are going to be utilizing, and more information is to come on this, a universal screener. It's going to be a trauma-based screener, so we can identify students and families that had the most difficulty or were impacted the most during this pandemic. And then additionally, we're going to, we have a district re-engagement plan that is a pre-K through 12 plus plan to help identify which students and families struggled the most engaging in distance learning throughout the spring, and then work with students to identify key people that we can connect them to within the building to work with families on developing a plan of support for all.
Thank you. Another logistical question. There are plenty in here that I think people will get answered if we do different levels webinars. But one is passing time in the hallway at high school. How is that going to work safely? And what is the plan for that?
So part of why, and this is Zakiya Parrish again, part of why we're operating under a reduced capacity is exactly to provide for that, so that we are able to allow our students to pass through the hallways without the need to be shoulder to shoulder, 1,500 students within the building, all trying to get to different places throughout the building. So part of what we've done in reducing that capacity and going to this hybrid model is so that students are able to transition between classes without significantly impacting our instructional time. Because when our high school teams were looking at, mapping out the schedule of the day with the full five day a week in person, under the 5 day a week in person model, what they realized is that there was so much instructional time that needed to be shaved off in order to allow for these staggered transition periods. And so in order to minimize the impact on instruction and also reduce the volume of students in the hallway, this is what the hybrid model is going to allow us to be able to do that.
I would only add, thank you. I would only add a couple things. In all of our buildings, the custodians are in the final processes of stripping and waxing the floors. And before they apply the final wax coat, they're going to be putting down blue painter's tape with arrows. We're going to make our hallways, wherever possible, one way, stairwells one way. In a building like Ward, for example, it lends itself to, because of the the circular nature of the hallways, we can do one way around each of the blocks. Ludlow presents more difficulty around that. So in certain places, we're going to have to make two-way hallways. But again, striping the hallways and increasing or directing more of the traffic flow And this will also happen at the middle and elementary schools as well, in order to reduce, as Dr. Parrish said, reduce as much interaction of students as possible. And also we'll be monitoring. We'll be looking for these issues in the hallways, and we'll make adjustments as necessary with traffic flows and those types of things.
Thank you. One more, I guess the last big theme that I will, and I know that there are a lot of questions in the chat that we have not gotten to. That doesn't mean that they're not legitimate or important. We are just trying to hit sort of the biggest ones at this point, with the understanding that this was the instructional webinar. I think the question goes back to logistics about when and how do we make the decision to move between hybrid to fully in person, to going fully distant. People have made the comment that numbers are fairly low in Fairfield right now, and we are planning on not opening fully in person. Is there a threshold that we would meet where we would make that switch? What would that be? And, if we are going for 2 or so weeks with students before we restart the reevaluation process, what is the criteria going to be for reevaluating then? That's going to be different from today.
So I'll answer that. The first and foremost issue is that the health data remains low. The state, and this information is already on the website. The state has provided information in both and primarily in Addendum 4, which is on the website, on the how the metrics work to determine how schools should transition from each of the 3 phases of learning, from full in person to remote, to hybrid to remote. What we don't have is clear guidance yet on some of the secondary indicators that they talk about. So that, as long as those numbers, as long as the primary number remains low and the secondary numbers, once they're released, are within those ranges, then the possibility exists that we could go back to full in-person instruction. On our end, the thing that's driving the hybrid model need is the issues around, primarily around social distancing. Although the cohorting is an issue, as well as as we've talked about a little bit, the air quality issues that we're concerned about, and heat in September. And quite honestly, even just people's discomforts with masks and those things. These are things we're going to have to kind of work through. But let me focus on the social distancing, because that's really the biggest issue. What we've got to be able to do once students are back in the building and we are able to see how they fill the spaces, we're going to have to look at what additional spaces might become available. One of the things we don't have yet is a final number on how many people might be picking remote learning. That in itself could potentially reduce the number of students in the building. And as I've said to several people in responses to emails I've received on this, we didn't have that information before we had to land on opening models, because of the things that I've already talked about on multiple occasions. So we're going to have to, when we see what the buildings actually look like with students back, and we think about how that's going to look if the 2 cohorts are combined, are we able to open up additional spaces in our cafeterias, in our APRs, at the secondary level, and in some of the larger spaces that we can accommodate students for the larger gatherings? And by larger gatherings, the particular issue, particularly at elementary, is lunch. Because at lunch, students do have to take off their masks, and at that point, the social distancing requirement is 6 feet. There's just no leeway on that. We can't do that now. Not with lunch being done primarily in our elementary classrooms, because other spaces will be taken up. So as I said earlier, the thing that we're going to work on in September is, I guess the best way of putting it is really space analysis, to see that if the numbers remain low and we're able to bring people back, can we bring students back full time? I will say this now, as just a precaution, that we're going to have to make this on a level by level decision, just as we did when we talked about the hybrid. So a solution for one level may not be a solution for other levels. And as we've talked about at the secondary level, the cohorting remains a primary concern, just because of the schedule and students switching classes. The final piece I'd put in here, only because so much changes and so much changes all the time, is that additional health guidance from the CDC or the state could come down at any point. As we've seen, there's every day there's at least a study or two that comes out around how COVID-19 works. So if, as a result of those studies, some of the health data changes, or excuse me, the health guidance changes, then that could work in our favor as well. Of course, it might not, but that's something we're going to have to consider when we think about the fact that September 25th is about 6 weeks out. So that's the summary of that.
So we have a few minutes to wrap up, and I think at this point, people have questions about the basics about the survey. When do people need to choose? How do they make that choice? Is there going to be more information between now and their submission of their survey decision? Again, it becomes a logistical question for folks.
So this is Akia Parrish, Executive Director of Operations and Processes. So the survey deadline is Sunday, August 16th. That is a hard deadline because we need to then pull down that data in order to start working on the cohorts, as well as mapping out the transportation routes and identifying the schedules that students are going to have at the different levels. So that is a hard deadline for the survey. In terms of additional information, we are constantly posting things to our website. As Superintendent Cummings mentioned, every time we receive a new guidance document from the state, we do post that to our website. There are additional resources there. There are links to the different hybrid learning plans, as well as the remote plans, in addition to all of the state addendums that have been generated. We also have made revisions to our reopening plan. And so that document, the most recent version of it, is always on the website as well. So anytime there's a major development, Superintendent Cummings definitely sends out a parent email and notification letting everyone know of any changes, major changes that may have happened. Hopefully we don't receive any other surprises from the state level, but we are ready to adjust accordingly if necessary.
Thank you. Mr. Mancusi, could you quickly address what the plan is for the Community Partnership Program?
Yes, on Monday, and to our families, if we have any families from the Community Partnership Program out there, Monday we will be speaking specifically about the CPP. Ms. Donowitz will be there, and additionally, we will be in contact personally with the CPP parents to discuss what programming will look like this year, at least at the start of this year.
There are a lot of people in the comments who feel like their specific question was addressed tonight, or they don't have the information that they need in order to make a decision. So what would the recommendation of the group be for those people about next steps if they have answers that they are looking for? Some of them are about cleaning protocols. Some of them are about really the difference of schedules between distance learning and hybrid learning. How would someone get that information?
As you've described the questions, those answers are online. Excuse me, are online. The cleaning protocols are outlined in the reopening document. The hybrid, each of the leveled hybrid descriptions, elementary, middle, and high, have copies of schedules in them. We are updating the remote learning elementary schedule to provide more detail than it's online, but that will be updated tomorrow and placed online in the remote learning plan document. That heading on the front page of the website, excuse me, on the COVID-19 website, the district website, is learning plan resources. I think that's what it's called, or 2021 learning plan resources. So all those informational pieces are there, and they will be the best place to get answers and you spend time with those answers. So that's my recommendation. The best place to go is the documents online, where we've answered the questions that, you know, we've addressed a lot of these issues that are being raised.
I think that's it for themes tonight in the comments. Do you have anything you would want to say in closing, Mike, or anyone else in the group?
I don't know if anybody else wants to speak. I'll be silent for a minute here in case.
I look forward, this is Rob Mancusi again, special education. I look forward to speaking with our parents and our SEPTA representatives on Monday night.
Thank you, Rob.
This is Zakia Parrish. Just to say that, you know, we understand and recognize that this is a very difficult situation, or a difficult decision rather, for parents to make, and especially since the changes that we had to implement came about in such a short period of time. We recognize that there's a lot that needs to go into your decision-making process. So we do invite you to look at some of our FAQs that we put together. There's one specifically on hybrid learning, in addition to the general FAQ that we put together in the reopening document. And hopefully there are spaces within that document that are places rather within that document that have the answers to the questions that you all have. And if not there, definitely some of the additional resources that we posted under the 2021 Learning Plan Information subheader.
Thanks. And I would say that the cleaning protocols are on our website and that information as well for the people who are looking for that information.
I think I'd like to, first of all, just to thank everybody again for being here tonight. And this is what I say to you. Making this decision is clearly it's a very tough choice. It's a very personal choice. There are folks out there I know who already have selected the remote learning option, because I've heard from quite a number of families who are worried for a number of reasons about family members, maybe the children themselves, who have health issues that they're working to protect. And that's the right call for that family. I'd say that if you don't have those issues, if you're wrestling with the idea of which is the better learning option for your student, I go back to the slide about trust. We are two important things. We're committing to the safety and welfare of your children when they're in the school. We're committing to following the cleaning protocols. We're committing to following the social distancing guidelines. We are close partnership with our health department, with our nurses who will be on site to have oversight of the buildings. And we'll be working through all the protocols about maintaining health and safety in the buildings and keeping health and safety throughout the school year. The other one is about the education. And as we've tried to describe tonight, the work we've done in response to your concerns around distance learning and how we've brought that forward into all of our instructional models is significant. And I recognize that that's a question of trust for you to see if that's what do you trust us that we've done that? I would say this to you, I can say it as easy as anything, but this is our professional and personal commitment to you that this has happened. And I also would say to you that as we go forward, we expect your feedback through the process. So if things are not where they need to be, I would like you to approach it as a growth opportunity for us and say, this is what I'm not seeing, not getting, and we can work through those processes. Because again, we are committed to moving forward in support of the kids.
Thank you. Okay. I think we're all set.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you and good night.